Selected Works of Mao Zedong. Reform Our Study. May 1941. Comrade Mao Zedong made this report to a cadres meeting in Yan'an. The report and the 2 articles, Rectify the Party's Style of Work and Oppose Stereotyped Party Writing, are Comrade Mao Zedong's basic works on the rectification movement. In these he summed up, on the ideological plane, past differences in the party over the party line and analyzed the petty bourgeois ideology and style which, masquerading as Marxism-Leninism, were prevalent in the party, and which chiefly manifested themselves in subjectivist and sectarian tendencies, their form of expression being stereotyped party writing. Comrade Mao Zedong called for a party-wide movement of Marxist-Leninist education to rectify style of work in accordance with the ideological principles of Marxism-Leninism. His call very quickly led to a great debate between proletarian and petty bourgeois ideology inside and outside the party. This consolidated the position of proletarian ideology inside and outside the party, enabled the broad ranks of cadres to take a great step forward ideologically in the party to achieve unprecedented unity. I propose that we should reform the method and the system of study throughout the party. The reasons are as follows. The 20 years of the Communist Party of China have been 20 years in which the universal truth of Marxism-Leninism has become more and more integrated with the concrete practice of the Chinese Revolution. If we recall how superficial meager our understanding of Marxism-Leninism and of the Chinese Revolution was during our party's infancy, we can see how much deeper and richer it is now. For 100 years, the finest sons and daughters of the disaster-ridden Chinese nation fought and sacrificed their lives. One stepping into the breach as another fell, in quest of the truth that would save the country and the people. This moves us to song and tears. But it was only after World War I and the October Revolution in Russia that we found Marxism-Leninism, the best of truths, the best of weapons for liberating our nation. And the Communist Party of China has been the initiator, propagandist and organizer in the wielding of this weapon. As soon as it was linked with the concrete practice of the Chinese Revolution, the universal truth of Marxism-Leninism gave an entirely new complexion to the Chinese Revolution. Since the outbreak of the War of Resistance against Japan, our party, basing itself on the universal truth of Marxism-Leninism, has taken a further step in its study of the concrete practice of this war and in its study of China and the world today, and has also made a beginning in the study of Chinese history. These are all very good signs. 2. However, we still have shortcomings, and very big ones too. Unless we correct these shortcomings, we shall not, in my opinion, be able to take another step forward in our work and in our great cause of integrating the universal truth of Marxism-Leninism with the concrete practice of the Chinese Revolution. First, take the study of current conditions. We have achieved some success in our study of present domestic and international conditions, but for such a large political party as ours, the material we have collected is fragmentary and our research work unsystematic on each and every aspect of these subjects, whether it be the political, military, economic or cultural aspect. Generally speaking, in the last 20 years we have not done systematic and thorough work in collecting and studying material on these aspects, and we are lacking in a climate of investigation and study of objective reality. To behave like a blindfolded man catching sparrows, or a blind man groping for fish, to be crude and careless, to indulge in verbiage, to rest content with a smattering of knowledge such as the extremely bad style of work that still exists among many comrades in our party, a style utterly opposed to the fundamental spirit of Marxism-Leninism. Marx, Engels, Lenin and Stalin have taught us that it is necessary to study conditions conscientiously and to proceed from objective reality and not from subjective wishes, but many of our comrades act in direct violation of his truth. Second, take the study of history. Although a few party members and sympathizers have undertaken this work, it has not been done in an organized way. Many party members are still in a fog about Chinese history, whether of the last 100 years or of ancient times. There are many Marxist-Leninist scholars who cannot open their mouths without citing ancient Greece, but as for their own ancestors, they have been forgotten. There is no climate of serious study either of current conditions or of past history. Third, take the study of international revolutionary experience, the study of the universal truth of Marxism-Leninism. Many comrades seem to study Marxism-Leninism not to meet the needs of revolutionary practice, but purely for the sake of study. Consequently, though they read, they cannot digest. They can only cite odd quotations from Marx, Engels, Lenin and Stalin in a one-sided manner, but are unable to apply the stand, viewpoint and method of Marx, Engels, Lenin and Stalin to the concrete study of China's present conditions and her history or to the concrete analysis and solution of the problems of the Chinese Revolution. Such an attitude towards Marxism-Leninism does a great deal of harm, particularly among cadres of the middle and high ranks. The three aspects I have just mentioned, neglect of the study of current conditions, neglect of the study of history and neglect of the application of Marxism-Leninism, all constitute an extremely bad style of work. Its spread has harmed many of our comrades. There are indeed many comrades in our ranks who have been led astray by this style of work. Unwilling to carry on systematic and thorough investigation and study of the specific conditions inside and outside the country, the province, county or district, they issue orders on no other basis than their scanty knowledge, and it must be so because it seems so to me. Does not this subjectivist style still exist among a great many comrades? There are some who are proud, instead of ashamed, of knowing nothing or very little of our own history. What is particularly significant is that very few really know the history of the Communist Party of China and the history of China in the 100 years since the Opium War. Hardly anyone has seriously taken up the study of the economic, political, military and cultural history of the last 100 years. Ignorant of their own country, some people can only relate tales of ancient Greece and other foreign lands, and even this knowledge is quite pathetic, consisting of odds and ends from old foreign books. For several decades, many of the returned students from abroad have suffered from this malady. Coming home from Europe, America or Japan, they can only parrot things foreign. They become gramophones and forget their duty to understand and create new things. This malady has also infected the Communist Party. Although we are studying Marxism, the way many of our people study it runs directly counter to Marxism. That is to say, they violate the fundamental principle earnestly enjoined on us by Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Stalin, the unity of theory and practice. Having violated this principle, they invent an opposite principle of their own, the separation of theory from practice. In the schools and in the education of cadres at work, teachers of philosophy do not guide students to study the logic of the Chinese Revolution. Teachers of economics do not guide them to study the characteristics of the Chinese economy. Teachers of political science do not guide them to study the tactics of the Chinese Revolution. Teachers of military science do not guide them to study the strategy and tactics adapted to China's special features, and so on and so forth. Consequently, error is disseminated, doing people great harm. A person does not know how to apply in Fujian, 1, what he has learned in Yan'an. Professors of economics cannot explain the relationship between the border region currency and the Kuomintang currency, 2, so naturally the students cannot explain it either. Thus a perverse mentality has been created among many students. Instead of showing an interest in China's problems and taking the party's directives seriously, they give all their hearts to the supposedly eternal and immutable dogmas learned from their teachers. Of course, what I have just said refers to the worst type in our party, and I am not saying that it is the general case. However, people of this type do exist. What is more, there are quite a few of them and they cause a great deal of harm. This matter should not be treated lightly. 3. In order to explain this idea further, I should like to contrast two opposite attitudes. First, there is the subjectivist attitude. With this attitude, a person does not make a systematic and thorough study of the environment, but works by sheer subjective enthusiasm and has a blurred picture of the face of China today. With this attitude, he chops up history, knows only ancient Greece but not China, and is in a fog about the China of yesterday and the day before yesterday. With this attitude, A person studies Marxist-Leninist theory in the abstract and without any aim. He goes to Marx, Engels, Lenin and Stalin not to seek the stand, viewpoint and method with which to solve the theoretical and tactical problems of the Chinese Revolution, but to study theory purely for theory's sake. He does not shoot the arrow at the target but shoots at random. Marx, Engels, Lenin and Stalin have taught us that we should proceed from objective realities and that we should derive laws from them to serve as our guide to action. For this purpose, we should, as Marx has said, appropriate the material in detail and subject it to scientific analysis and synthesis. 3. Many of our people do not act in this way but do the opposite. A good number of them are doing research work but have no interest in studying either the China of today or the China of yesterday and confine their interest to the study of empty theories divorced from reality. Many others are doing practical work, but they too pay no attention to the study of objective conditions, often rely on sheer enthusiasm and substitute their personal feelings for policy. Both kinds of people, relying on the subjective, ignore the existence of objective realities. When making speeches, they indulge in a long string of headings, A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, and when writing articles, they turn out a lot of verbiage. They have no intention of seeking truth from facts, but only a desire to curry favor by claptrap. They are flashy without substance, brittle without solidity. They are always right. They are the number one authority under heaven, imperial envoys who rush everywhere. Such is the style of work of some comrades in our ranks. To govern one's own conduct by this style is to harm oneself, to teach it to others is to harm others, and to use it to direct the revolution is to harm the revolution. To sum up, this subjectivist method, which is contrary to science and Marxism-Leninism, is a formidable enemy of the Communist Party, the working class, the people and the nation. It is a manifestation of impurity in party spirit. A formidable enemy stands before us, and we must overthrow him. Only when subjectivism is overthrown can the truth of Marxism-Leninism prevail, can party spirit be strengthened, can the revolution be victorious. We must assert that the absence of a scientific attitude, that is, the absence of the Marxist-Leninist approach of uniting theory and practice, means that party spirit is either absent or deficient. There is a couplet which portrays this type of person. It runs: the reed growing on the wall top heavy, thin-stemmed and shallow of root. The bamboo shoot in the hill sharp-tongued, thick-skinned and hollow inside. Is this not an apt description of those who do not have a scientific attitude, who can only recite words and phrases from the works of Marx, Engels, Lenin and Stalin, and who enjoy a reputation unwarranted by any real learning? If anyone really wishes to cure himself of his malady, I advise him to commit this couplet to memory or to show still more courage and paste it on the wall of his room. Marxism-Leninism is a science, and science means honest, solid knowledge. There is no room for playing tricks. Let us, then, be honest. Secondly, there is the Marxist-Leninist attitude. With this attitude, a person applies the theory and method of Marxism-Leninism to the systematic and thorough investigation and study of the environment. He does not work by enthusiasm alone but, as Stalin says, combines revolutionary sweep with practicalness. 4. With this attitude he will not chop up history. It is not enough for him to know ancient Greece, he must know China, he must know the revolutionary history not only of foreign countries but also of China, not only the China of today but also the China of yesterday and of the day before yesterday. With this attitude, one studies the theory of Marxism-Leninism with a purpose, that is, to integrate Marxist-Leninist theory with the actual movement of the Chinese Revolution and to seek from this theory the stand, viewpoint and method with which to solve the theoretical and tactical problems of the Chinese Revolution. Such an attitude is one of shooting the arrow at the target. The target is the Chinese Revolution. The arrow is Marxism-Leninism. We Chinese communists have been seeking this arrow because we want to hit the target of the Chinese Revolution and of the Revolution of the East. To take such an attitude is to seek truth from facts. Facts are all the things that exist objectively. Truth means their internal relations, that is, the laws governing them, and to seek means to study. We should proceed from the actual conditions inside and outside the country, the province, county or district, and derive from them, as our guide to action, laws which are inherent in them and not imaginary, that is, we should find the internal relations of the events occurring around us. And in order to do that we must rely not on subjective imagination, not on momentary enthusiasm, not on lifeless books, but on facts that exist objectively. We must appropriate the material in detail and, guided by the general principles of Marxism-Leninism, draw correct conclusions from it. Such conclusions are not mere lists of phenomena in A, B, C, D order or writings full of platitudes, but are scientific conclusions. Such an attitude is one of seeking truth from facts and not of currying favor by claptrap. It is the manifestation of party spirit, the Marxist-Leninist style of uniting theory and practice. It is the attitude every Communist Party member should have at the very least. He who adopts this attitude will be neither top-heavy, thin-stemmed and shallow of root nor sharp-tongued, thick-skinned and hollow inside. 4. In accordance with the above views, I would like to make the following proposals. 1. We should place before the whole party the task of making a systematic and thorough study of the situation around us. On the basis of the theory and method of Marxism-Leninism, we should make a detailed investigation and study of developments in the economic, financial, political, military, cultural and party activities of our enemies, our friends and ourselves, and then draw the proper and necessary conclusions. To this end, we should direct our comrades' attention to the investigation and study of these practical matters. We should get our comrades to understand that the twofold basic task of the leading bodies of the Communist Party is to know conditions and to master policy. The former means knowing the world and the latter changing the world. We should get our comrades to understand that without investigation there is no right to speak, and that bombastic waddle and a mere list of phenomena in 1, 2, 3, 4 order are of no use. Take propaganda work, for instance. If we do not know the situation with regard to the propaganda of our enemies, our friends and ourselves, we shall be unable to decide on a correct propaganda policy. In the work of any department, it is necessary to know the situation first and only then can the work be well handled. The fundamental link in changing the party's style of work is to carry out plans for investigation and study throughout the party. 2. As for China's history in the last 100 years, we should assemble qualified persons to study it, in cooperation and with the proper division of labor, and so overcome the present disorganized state of affairs. First, it is necessary to make analytical studies in the several fields of economic history, political history, military history and cultural history, and only then will it be possible to make synthetical studies. 3. As for education for cadres, whether at work or in schools for cadres, a policy should be established of focusing such education on the study of the practical problems of the Chinese Revolution and using the basic principles of Marxism-Leninism as the guide, and the method of studying Marxism-Leninism statically and in isolation should be discarded. Moreover, in studying Marxism-Leninism, we should use the history of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, Bolsheviks, short course as the principal material. It is the best synthesis and summing up of the world communist movement of the past 100 years, a model of the integration of theory and practice, and so far the only comprehensive model in the whole world. When we see how Lenin and Stalin integrated the universal truth of Marxism with the concrete practice of the Soviet Revolution and thereby developed Marxism, we shall know how we should work in China. We have made many detours. But error is often the precursor of what is correct. I am confident that in the context of the Chinese Revolution and the World Revolution, which is so intensely alive and so richly varied, this reform of our study will certainly yield good results. Notes. 1. Fujian County is about 70 kilometers south of Yan'an. 2. The border region currency consisted of the currency notes issued by the Bank of the Shenxi Gansuning's a border region government. The Kuomintang currency was the paper currency issued by the four big Kuomintang bureaucrat capitalist banks from 1935 onwards with British and U.S. imperialist support. Comrade Mao Zedong was referring to the fluctuations in the rates of exchange between these two currencies. 3. See Karl Marx, afterword to the second German edition of Capital, in which he wrote, the latter, the method of inquiry, has to appropriate the material in detail, to analyze its different forms of development, to trace out their interconnection. Only after this work is done, can the actual movement be adequately described. Capital, A. ed. FLPH, Moscow, Volume 1, p. 19. 4. C.J.V. Stalin, The Foundations of Leninism, Problems of Leninism S. ed. Moscow, 1952, p. 80. Transcription by the Maoist Documentation Project. HTML revised 2004 by Marxists.org. Selected works of Mao